Tales from the Cassette. We're in season 2 now, after our opening season last year of last week of Star Wars movie last year. See, this is what happens when I get a phone call right when I start talking. I get distracted. Where we talk Star Wars movies, and we deviated from our music conversations. But we are back talking music this week. So I'm Jeff Beach.
I'm Joey Graves.
This week, we are going to talk about 1983. Big year in music.
Big year in music.
Huge year in music. We're going to break it all down. No common theme, no specifics. We didn't pick the best albums. We didn't pick the best songs. But we're going to talk about the year in general and what a wild music year it was. Very, I think I see it as almost like a bridge year to the next couple years that were coming.
As I did the research on this, it's a year of a lot of iconic artists that are still talked about today.
Yes, I agree. Well, I mean, you had before we get, maybe we'll get there. It's funny when you think about that. Probably my favorite 80s years, and I love 80s music. Probably my favorite 80s music year is the next year, 1984. And 1984 was different, I think, than 83 because you had so many artists hit their big time, their biggest time. Because that's when Springsteen released Born in the USA, and Madonna released Like a Virgin, and you had Prince's Purple Rain out. And so you had these massive stars in 84. 83 was different.
But I think it was a introduction to a lot of these stars.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Because the same ones that I mentioned, not Springsteen, but Madonna released an album in 83. Prince had music out in 83. And you're right. So it was, but it's interesting as I was reviewing the top 100. In fact, 83 was one of my favorite years I remember because, back in the day, if we wanted to listen to music, you turned on the radio. If you wanted the variety, and then you go buy albums or cassettes. But so I would listen to Casey Kasem's top 100 or top, top, what is it? Top 20 every week. How much? Oh no, top 40. Top 40 every week. And then at the end of the year, he would do a top 100. And so I remember back in the day, so you'd be listening to this and then be like, if you want a copy of our top 100, send us a self-addressed stamped envelope and we'll send one back to you. So somewhere in this house, I think I still have the top 100 from 1983.
Wow.
Yeah. From Casey Kasem. He did not sign it, unfortunately. Did not sign it.
Well, take for example, Def Leppard.
Mm-hmm.
They had, I think, 2 albums previously before Pyromania, but Pyromania was really boom. It was when they exploded. Huey Lewis.
Yep. Sports was released. Sports. Now, most of Sports.
Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of Sports didn't really take off until 84, even though it was released early.
Released in 83, though.
Yeah, released in 83. But yeah, the big year for that was 84. You mentioned Def Leppard. I thought 83 was the year, if you start looking at hair bands, that it became more acceptable to, radio airplay for these rock bands. Def Leppard's a great example because all of a sudden you've got Rock of Ages and, pure rock songs hitting, regular pop radio. You had, you said, Motley Crue was out there, and you had Quiet Riot and their Mental Health album getting massive radio airplay. When, if you go back and look at 82, there was some rock in there, but not like what you were starting to see in '83.
Yeah, probably more new wave type of music in '82.
Yes, yeah, more new wave. But it really became, I think, laying the groundwork for these rock bands. And then of course you had, and we'll bounce around here today, but in the background of all that you had MTV, which was there, not hitting its heyday yet, but bands were starting to discover, hey, I put a cool video out there and I got a song like Def Leppard and they started making videos, and Motley Crue and they started making videos. I don't have to beg the radio stations to play me. I will just put out a cool video and go be on MTV all the time.
Well, I did not have MTV yet in '83, so I was staying up and watching TBS Night Tracks.
Night Tracks? You had Friday night videos on USA?
Friday night videos on NBC, yes.
Was it NBC or was it something USA had on like late night Friday nights? And then there was another, it seems like there was a third one. I always remember that we would try to stay up to watch because we were hoping they'd play, what's the Duran Duran video, one of their first ones?
Rio, Hungry Like a Wolf.
For that, the one that was, the one that, you always, the racy video, and you're like, I'm going to stay up to watch that one. All right, we'll have to look that up.
It's the,
I know, it's Girls on Film.
Girls on Film. That was some kind of picture. I was thinking of picture film. Yes.
Girls
on Film.
Girls on Film. So yeah, so you'd always stay up to watch those videos. I can't remember when I got MTV. I told you I had recently read the book about MTV. So I think we got it in Carrollton before like some of the big cities got it, because they concentrated on rolling it out to the rural areas first because the metro areas wouldn't take it. So we were earlier than many. So we got it somewhere around there, because I remember these videos, but it's hard to tell because it blends, because as they were building up their library, they just started playing everything. But I am pretty sure we got it sometime during this year, because of the biggest album of '83, sales-wise, was Thriller. And his videos were all over the place. And I remember watching those all the time. It was pretty funny as I was doing the research today, and this was in the MTV book that I read as well, about MTV. And, they weren't really sure what kind of music they wanted to play all the time. They didn't want to play anything really outside of what they considered the mainstream. So, they weren't playing the hair bands. And they weren't playing, they didn't really see themselves as a sort of a black radio medium either. So they weren't playing Michael Jackson. And so they were playing all the, they would play the Police, and they would play Hall & Oates, and they would play, Culture Club and all that kind of stuff. But they weren't playing Michael Jackson. And so, Thriller comes out, Billie Jean gets the video made, MTV's not playing it. But so, it gets released in the radio, it's on the radio all the time. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, in the MTV book I read, there's a lot of back and forth about why MTV eventually played it. But I think it was just all of a sudden, we've got to, we have to play this because it's monstrous and so different than anything else they really had at the time.
Again, like Night Tracks, watching Night Tracks. One of the videos that I believe I watched, God, it seemed like every weekend they played it, because I guess they only had so many videos. 99 Left Balloons.
Hated that song.
I liked it in the beginning, but after you watch it so many times, that video, like, okay, I'm done.
I still listen to 80s music a lot, so a lot of stuff comes on. But yeah, anytime that song comes on, it's a quick switch.
Well, you got this was when it was German. It was the full German version. It was not the
that's worse.
The red balloons, 99 red balloons. It was Luft balloons.
Yeah. That was worse. That was it was an interesting year. So because you had Michael Jackson, and he started appearing all over the place, and his Thriller was just a monster album that like overshadowed everything. And then you had sort of on the flip side, not quite the hard rock band, but you had the Police and their Synchronicity. So, which got a lot of MTV play, a lot of radio play. Biggest song of the year, the love song, Every Breath You Take.
Yeah.
And then you had some bands like Launch that you had never seen before. Well, you know, it wasn't their really launch, but you really hadn't seen much of them. But like Men at Work became a monster band that year as well. I mentioned Hall & Oates was still going super strong. You know, you had Duran Duran's Rio album.
Duran Duran was for me, it was, they were everywhere.
Well, their video, kind of like Michael Jackson's videos, their videos were perfect for what people were trying to do with the Friday night videos and night tracks and, you know, MTV. So you had Hungry Like the Wolf, you had Rio, they're telling a story, you know, they're, totally different than some of the videos where the bands are just kind of standing in front of the camera.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Is it was even though they had album before, maybe 2 albums before, the videos off of Rio were mini movies.
Yes.
Mini 4-minute movies.
Little stories.
Yes.
You're trying to figure what's going on. Why is Simon Le Bon in this restaurant cafe in this place with no air conditioning? Why are the elephants there, and why are they riding them? And yeah,
taken straight from Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, you had all of that going on, and then you had, you know, we mentioned it before. So you had Prince, his little red Corvette, and so that you had that album. You had no idea what was about to come. You had Madonna's album come out with Holiday. You know, not realizing how big she was about to be. You know, you had.
She looked her best in Material Girl, though, which is a later album.
Yeah, that's 90. That's 84. You can't switch years.
I know. I'm just saying that she looked damn good in that video.
Yes, yes. So you had all that going on, but you had some big bands as well that were still putting out stuff. So you had Styx that year. The Mr. Roboto was in the top 100, which is the song that
Dubious Mr. Roboto.
Yeah, killed them in their current form. You know, that was the song that broke them up.
But also there's another band that had albums previously, but really took off in '83. ZZ Top.
Yes. Yes.
Legs.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did we watch Legs video because they showed a lot of legs?
Yes, they did. Well, their videos were like one long. Yeah, their videos. Give Me All Your Love and Legs, and what's the other one? There were 3 of them they did in a row.
Yeah, there were 3,
and they were basically the same story. Where they might have filmed them all in a row.
the same girl, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. So it was Legs,
Sharp Dressed
Man. That was it. Yeah. In a row. Yeah, that one's it was funny. I don't see them on my top 100 from 83, which means they must have been late in the year and rolling over into 84. Yeah. So, but you had Journey, really, with their last big 80s before Raised on Radio a few years later that we've reviewed in another episode if you're digging through our catalog. But yeah, you had Journey with Frontiers, which was a massive album as well. So many hit songs coming off there. But in 80, I think that came out maybe in 82. But you had Faithfully in their top 100 as well. Oh, in Separate Ways was in there.
You know, really, I think that the 83, 84, I think it was just an absolute perfect time for music. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe it was timing for our, becoming teenagers and our bodies blossoming and all that. But
don't talk about that. I don't think you're allowed to talk about that.
But it was for music. It was great. You had MTV. Everything kind of came together for me anyway. Yeah. You know, Men at Work was one of my absolute favorites of that time. It was, I think the second album that I ever bought with my own money. The first being the Go-Go's.
Yeah.
And then Men at Work, Business as Usual was my second.
Nice. That was another big year. So we talked about Michael Jackson, and so he released Thriller was the number one album of that year. Billie Jean was released that year, and Thriller came out that winter at the end of the year, which was just, if you remember that event, I mean, that thing was a mini movie. Yeah, just insane. So I know we had it by then. So we must have got it sometime during this year.
Well, I could tell you the first video
that you saw
that I saw on MTV. That's how much it. Some people remember where they were when Kennedy got shot or the shuttle blew up. I remember the first video that I watched on MTV.
Okay, what was it?
The Curly Shuffle. Do you remember the Curly Shuffle?
I do remember it.
So that was in 1984.
Okay. All right.
So the Curly Shuffle was released in 1984.
Maybe it was like, I'm pretty sure that I watched Thriller when it premiered. We talked about, some of the best out. So Def Leppard's Pyromania released. You had Photograph, Full Rock of Ages, really brought rock music and more mainstream. You had the Police bring forth their biggest album and just made them superstars. Every Breath You Take, but you had Synchronicity, you had King of Pain. And so, people that didn't know the Police, they were like, wow, this is just a, great new band. And then, of course, they've been putting stuff out, forever. It had Roxanne many years before that, but this was the one that really put them outside their monster fan base on the map. Shout out to the Devil.
Shout out to this is a chart for top albums of 83.
Okay.
So Business as Usual, Men at Work was from January 1st to February 19th, number one. And then February 26th, all the way to June 18th was Thriller.
Yep.
And then you had 2 weeks of Flashdance soundtrack.
Okay, yeah.
And then you had 2 weeks of Thriller back at number one.
Okay.
And then you had Synchronicity with the Police from July 23rd to September 3rd, number one.
Wow.
Then you had 1 week of Thriller once again.
Okay.
Then you had September 17th through November 19th, Synchronicity
again
came back to number one.
Okay.
1 week of Mental Health, Quiet Riot. 3 weeks of Can't Slow Down by Lionel Richie. And then to end the year, 2 more weeks of Thriller at number one.
That makes sense. I mean, if you look at that year and Michael Jackson just releasing, those songs in a row, Billie Jean, Beat It. Actually, the first one he released was the slow song with Paul McCartney. The Girl Is Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he released that one, and so it's funny if you look at that album today, and he releases that one first when he's got all of the other stuff on there. But he kept releasing, and so every time he'd release a song, and back in the day, you just didn't go to Spotify and just play all the songs. Radio would play certain songs, and then MTV would play certain songs. So every time he kept releasing a new song, and they were going on for so long. I mean, Billie Jean was out there for so long. He released Beat It when I think Billie Jean was like in the top 10. So yeah, you could see that would be coming and going that whole time.
Well, the video it really kind of follows the premiere of the Thriller video, which was December the 2nd, 1983, is when it was released, and December 24th and 31st is when it went back to number one.
Yeah. We talked about Quiet Riot, first heavy metal band to be number one.
1 week.
1 week, but first one. First one. But that, again, we talked about, then all of a sudden you had rock bands becoming mainstream, which, they always kind of had their own little world, and they had their fans, but it wasn't being played on top 40 radio. Kiss Kiss had a big album in '83.
Lick It Up.
Lick It Up. So it's on MTV, took their makeup off. Yeah. So, and then got radio play out of that with Lick It Up.
You know, I think also maybe it just started in this year of '83, but I think you had a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here? A lot of feminine men type of lead singers, I guess.
Maybe Boy George.
Boy George started it. And then you have the lead singer of "You Spin Me Right Around, Baby."
Dead or Alive.
Dead or Alive. Yes, yeah. I don't know his name.
Well, you also had George Michael. So Wham's debut album was this year. So you had George Michael, hitting with "Wake Me Up Before You Go." Yeah, and you had just that, you had David Bowie. You had
but this is the era of David Bowie that I can get behind.
Yeah.
Because this is Blue Jean.
Yep.
Like Let's Dance, Blue Jean. Those are good songs.
They're good. I was never a huge David Bowie fan.
No, I wasn't either, but those two songs are really good.
Yeah, I was just never, but yeah, his biggest hit that year, Let's Dance. That was, if you read about that album, that was a huge comeback for him. But you're right. You just had a lot of more feminine males. I mean, the funny thing is when you look through the list, there were so many like one-hit wonders around some of these other bands, because you had Come On Eileen, which we've talked about in our one-hit wonder show. That happened that year. You had Twilight Zone from Golden Earring. You had the Greg Kihn Band's Jeopardy. You had Eddie Grant's Electric Avenue. Thomas Dolby's She Blinded Me with Science.
Oh.
And those were all almost right in a row. You had Der Kommissar from After the Fire, Putting on the Ritz. You had Safety Dance.
Was it Taco?
Taco.
Okay. Taco, something like that.
Did all those songs, and then you had these other bands like Naked Eyes that were releasing a few, but they had these monster hits like Always Something There to Remind Me. You had Too Shy by Kaja Gugu. You had Our House by Madness. So many of our one-hit wonders from our episode of that was in here. You had She's a Beauty by The Tubes. These are all '83 songs. You had...
But also, that goes back to wasn't Steve Lukather?
Yes, he was all over the place.
Yeah, on that, for The Tubes.
Yeah, he was all over the place. And then you had, so you had Stray Cats debuting there, and you had Spandau Ballet, True, probably one of the best slow songs of all time. So you had all that stuff going on, one-hit wonders. And then we talked about some of the debuts, and so you had Madonna. Cyndi Lauper's debut album came out in '83. So no one knew who she was, and she had The Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And so, that got crazy airplay on there. But some other good ones, really good albums that came out in '83. So you had the Eurythmics, who, no one had ever seen before. And all of a sudden you see this girl come on the screen in this short buzz cut red hair. And you're like, what is going on with this? Not even red. It's actually orange, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really bright orange. But it was, like that's 40 years ago. That happened today. You wouldn't think twice about it. I mean, just all right.
Back in '83, you're like looking, you're like, what's going on here? And I mean, depending on the type of TV you had, it was orange or it was red, because there was no high def back then.
Well, there was their second video off that album where she's in a limo and she has a blonde wig on.
Yeah.
She was hot.
Yeah.
In that wig.
Yeah, she was. Well, then she had the blonde shortcut later. Bryan Adams was Cuts Like a Knife was released. His big ones coming in Reckless in '84, but him and so he had a big release. You had Journey, we talked about that, and Styx. U2 was just starting to hit the mainstream a little bit around that time. Rick Springfield was still putting out big albums. I think that might have been one of his last huge ones, Living in Oz. One of your favorite bands of all time released one of their best albums in '83, Reach the Beach.
Fix, baby.
The Fix.
The Fix, baby.
If you're listening to this, anybody from The Fix, put your albums back on Spotify.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Or I could just go to YouTube and listen to them.
Yeah. I don't like doing that. I've got to have it. John Cougar's. Now, most of his stuff was being played in '84, but you had his album hit in the fall that year, and so you had Pink Houses and all of that to come. And you mentioned it earlier. So one of the biggest stars, and he didn't. It took him a minute to get it going because of all the Michael Jackson hype. But Lionel Richie's "Can't Slow Down" came out that year, All Night Long. Yeah.
Hello.
That's a beautiful. That's one of my favorite songs to play on piano. What I can play.
That's a great song.
It's an awesome song.
Yes. One day we'll do a top 10 songs of all time.
Top 10 songs? Yes. We haven't done that one yet. We should do top 10.
I don't think we have top 10 songs. We did top 10 album.
Okay, we could do top 10 songs, and we could do top 10 ballads. There you go.
Top 10 ballads. Okay, we can do that.
That'd be a good one. And at the end of the year, a couple of our favorites. So we mentioned Duran Duran. So they followed up Rio in all their albums with 7 and the Ragged Tiger, which turned out to be a good album. And then one of our favorite bands of all time, and we've talked about them on the podcast a lot, Midnight Madness from Night Ranger came out that fall.
I mean, what a great year.
Yes.
I mean, what a time to be alive and be 13 years old.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really.
The music was just crazy. And then you had the soundtracks were just taking off. You had the Flashdance one that we talked about before. You had Maniac was a top 10 song from that movie. You had Flashdance, What a Feeling. And then what was the other one? Some of the big soundtracks were coming the next year. I just listened to the Sirius XM 1984 year in review this past week because that was on, but not intentionally.
I intentionally listened to the 83.
Did you?
I did.
Yeah. Well,
not the one that you listened to. I just listened to like the.
Yeah. What's your favorite song from 83?
Oh man,
that's a tough one.
I don't think I can answer that question.
Okay.
I mean, even Quiet Riot. I really like a song from there. I like a song from Shout at the Devil.
Yeah. I'll tell you one of my.
You got Night Ranger.
Yeah.
You got Journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all know. We all like these. I'll tell you what I think is one of the coolest songs from '83. And it was written by Jim Steinman. Supposed to be a Meatloaf song, but he didn't take it. So they gave it to Bonnie Tyler.
No.
Total Eclipse of the Heart. Yeah. I think it's funny because when you listen to it and it's a Meatloaf song, you're like, oh yeah, I could see him singing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just a cool song. The way they did it, and it starts out with a slow piano and all that, and then it just turns into this big drum song. That's one of my, I think there's a lot of songs on there. I mean, we talked about it with a one-hit wonder. Some of the great songs, like Our House, is just an all-time classic. Yeah, so the Journey stuff that was going on. It's funny, there's no Meatloaf on here, but there's actually 2 songs that were written for him that he didn't sing. The other one was Air Supply's Making Love Out of Nothing at All. Little history for you.
I could hear him singing that too.
Yeah, those were both, I believe, written by Jim Steinman. Yeah. So yeah, it was an awesome year. Like I said, it just set up because there was so much variety. It's interesting when you listen to '84 the next year, and like I said, it just happened to be on this past week. 84 became much more concentrated in these massive, it became a whole bunch of like Michael Jackson Thriller type things, because all of a sudden these albums were getting released that had like 7 or 8 top 40 hits on them, which was very unusual before that. You know, you get that every now and then, but then when that 84 came along, you just saw that all those artists just started releasing these huge albums, and like all year long, you've got, you know, Bruce and Madonna and all these, you know, Huey Lewis and all these just releasing song after song after video after video.
So if you had to pick an album that you really liked in 1983 that you just think deserved more attention, what album would that be? Like if you wanted to encourage somebody to listen to an album
from 83
that you think deserves more attention.
Hold on a minute, I'll tell you. I mean, one of my favorite albums released then, and I always tie it to 84, is Sports. I think that's just a great album, but it got a lot of attention. I'll say, hold on. Caught me off guard. I would say go listen to the entire album of Rick Springfield, Living in Oz. He's got a couple
never done that.
He's got a couple huge hits on there. So Affair of the Heart's on there, and I don't think that's, I'd have to look and see, but that the rest of that album is great. Like every song on that album is good. That would be a good one to go listen to. That's one of those albums that, like, if I am just like, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna listen to today, I'm just gonna go back and listen to something. That's the one that you can go back to easily and listen to. So it's got Human Touch on it. That's the one I was trying to think of. Human Touch, Affair of the Heart. All the other songs are good. What about you?
You touched on it earlier. The Fix, Reach the Beach.
I knew you were going to say that. That's why I scrolled
by.
That
is a really good album.
As soon as they put it back on Spotify, I'm going to listen to
it. Go to YouTube.
But yeah, so good year. 1983 is a good year. I don't think we could go away from, this is a music show, but we did talk about movies last week. I don't think you can get away from, because 83 was also an awesome movie year. And I know we didn't prep for this, but I just happened to pull up the list of movies from the top movies from 1983. Of course, you had Return of the Jedi, top grossing movie of that year. You had Trading Places, which may not have been a movie that you and I were watching that year because we were 12 and 13. But I can appreciate now. But one of the greatest movies, I think, that was released that year was War Games.
Oh, yeah, War Games. Yeah.
War Games was so good. And then you had Risky Business, another movie that as a 12 and 13-year-old you couldn't watch, but you loved, really wanted to go watch it because the videos were getting played on there, and you're like, yeah, I want to go see that. And then you had Vacation, which even if you didn't see the movie, you had the poster of Chevy Chase, you know, holding the torch, and you had Christy Brinkley holding on to his leg, and you're like, I want to see that.
I still remember going to see The Outsiders.
Yes, was at school, right? School trip. I do too. How crazy is it they took a class to see The Outsiders?
I know. Yeah. I still look back on that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what were they thinking?
It's funny because I think of that every now and then. Like I see something on it and I'm like, yeah, we went on a school trip to see that. And then I can't think of any reason why we did that.
I mean, it is rated just PG. I'm surprised it's only rated PG.
I know. It's a gang movie. Not really a movie to take. And you figure, okay, in 83, so we were either going as end of 7th grade or
I think it was 7th grade.
Yeah, or beginning of 8th. That's when they would have taken us to that.
Yep, to the Florence Showcase Cinemas on across the street from the mall.
Yeah. So, yeah, crazy. Outsiders. Number 29 from that year. There you go. Right before the movie Spring Break. If you remember that.
I remember this. I don't remember watching it.
The poster?
I remember
Yeah.
I remember that kind of stuff.
I know. Yeah, poster. Because that's a little bit further down from Porky's 2, and 48 Hours. I don't think I saw that year. I think it was a year later I saw that movie. Another great classic movie.
So I think a little Porky's, the original Porky's.
Mm-hmm.
So myself, my dad, and my brother, who was 6 years older than me, we went to Madison, and my dad and I went to the first floor and watched Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
And then Porky's was playing upstairs. My brother went to that, and we kept on hearing this noise, like thunder. We thought it was raining outside.
Yeah.
It was literally people laughing so hard in the second floor that it was so loud.
Yeah.
And Porky's it's a fun movie. I mean, it really
is a fun movie.
I mean,
it kind of still holds up. Recent trip I was on with a friend, and we're doing nothing, and we're like, let's watch an old movie. Find an old movie. We wanted to watch. I just blanked on it. What's the ski movie from that same time frame?
Ski movie. Probably in the same vein as Spring Break, right?
Yes. Hold on, I'll tell you. So we wanted to watch a ski movie, Hot Dog the movie. So we wanted to watch Hot Dog, but we couldn't find it. So instead we watched Porky's. Yeah. So it was good though. It was good.
Good memories.
Good memories. Yeah, great memories. All right. Well, that is 1983 in review for you. Hopefully that rekindled some memories. Hopefully you'll go listen to some of the things we talked about today. We've got, we kind of stay in that same area. We got lots of 80s years to review because you got 83, talked about 84 and 85, how big those are. 81, 82 were really weird years where you still had a lot of things hanging over from the 70s somehow. You had a lot of Kenny Rogers in there. And then in the later 80s years, I would say it got a little crappy.
Yes.
It got a little crappy. We'll have to review some of those years, like our graduation year of 88. And yeah, when those top 40s come on, there's some decent stuff in there, but man, compared to these years, just not good.
I remember buying a car and had free XM radio or Sirius radio, whatever. And I did like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
Yep.
And I could not listen to the 90s.
No.
For very long. Occasionally there could be a good song, but I couldn't do it.
Right.
Nope. Back to 80s. And then I kind of got into the 70s music at that time too. Yeah. So I was like, I learned to appreciate it more.
Yeah. Somebody asked me, and I can't remember if we talked about it on this show or not, but why I'm not a fan of the 90s music at all. And if you remember, so you and I were together around 1990, 91 in school, and what kind of music we were listening to. So we were going to used CD stores and buying up CDs from the 80s. So most of my 80s music, like albums, I bought around that time frame. So I wasn't listening to the radio. I wasn't watching MTV anymore. I was listening to music that I bought. And so when we were in these long car rides between college, we were listening to Toto, and we were listening to Journey, and we were listening to stuff like that, and we weren't listening to the music. So I told somebody, I'm like, I think the reason is I never got in the 90s is because I never listened in the 90s. Maybe. Or maybe it's just not good music.
Well, we both got married somewhat early in the 90s, so probably allowing our spouse at the time, or my spouse at my time, at that time, to dictate what was on the radio.
Not Nirvana.
No, my ex-wife was not into. She was into the REM and the Concrete Blonde, and, that kind of music. Which
yeah. So all right. Well, Offhand, I don't think we know our next topic, but we'll have to do it soon. We got to mix in some time with vacations and all of that, but we will be back soon with another show.
Yes, we need to do it more often.
We have to do it more often. It's in demand. We're getting requests. So we will be back soon. But in the meantime, I'm Jeff Beach.
I'm Joey Graves.
All right. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. Go out there, like, share, comment. If you want to hear anything, subscribe. We're in the 50s. Get us
57.
Get us to 100. We picked up about 5 or 6 since the last show. Star Wars is driving subscribers. And we will, if you got an idea, but we will have a topic. We've got a list of like 1,000 long of shows, so we got a long way to go. All right. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Good night.
Good night. Peace out.